Marvel Studios just gave us our very first look at the MCU's X-Men. And while we've known for a while now that Marvel Studios was producing a future X-Men film, D23 gave us something that we have been waiting for a very long time. And that's the cast. We have Sadie Sink as Jean Grey, Kit Connor as Cyclops, Samara Weaving as Emma Frost. We have Christopher Abbott as Professor X, Inde Navarrette as Rogue, we have Maya Boyd as Storm, and we have Mr. Adam Driver himself as Mr. Sinister, which is perhaps the casting announcement that got the most immediate attention. And at first glance, this might just look like Marvel announcing just a bunch of actors. But the more you look at this cast, the more interesting the picture becomes. Because some of the rumors surrounding this movie suggest that Marvel is not just simply trying to recreate the X-Men movies that we've already seen. They're building something very different. A younger X-Men. A mutant population that is only beginning to emerge. A conflict between humans and mutants that could become one of the most defining conflicts of the new MCU. And potentially, a story where Jean Grey is at the center of it all. Now, before we go any further, I want to make something very, very clear. The casting announcements are confirmed. A lot of the story information that we're going to discuss today is not. These are rumors and reports, including information attributed to the Cosmic Circus and James McMack. So none of these rumored plot details should be treated as official until Marvel confirms them themselves. But even if some of these reports are true, Marvel's X-Men movie could be setting up something absolutely massive. Let's talk about it. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Nerds of the Multiverse channel. Let's start with the two characters who could ultimately become the heart of the entire story, Jean Grey and Scott Summers. Sadie Sink has officially been cast as Jean Grey, which we saw in Spider-Man Brand New Day, and now we have our Scott Summers. We have Kit Connor playing Cyclops. And these two castings are fascinating because one of the biggest rumors surrounding the movie is that Marvel's first X-Men team could actually be heavily inspired by the original comic book lineup, meaning Jean Grey, Cyclops, Beast, Angel, and Iceman. Now again, that's a rumor. But if it is true, it tells us something very interesting about Marvel's approach. This isn't going to be an X-Men team that has existed for years. And we see this obviously because Spider-Man Brand New Day, Sadie Sink's on her own. She's not a part of the X-Men yet. This is going to be a story about the first generation mutants. And it's being reported that the movie will have a coming-of-age element, with these young mutants having spent years hiding from humanity because they're afraid of what will happen if people discover what they are. And honestly, that makes Scott and Jean so important to this story. Because if this is the beginning of the X-Men, we're not watching established heroes learn how to work together. We're watching them become the X-Men. And Scott could be stepping into a role that we rarely got to explore in the live-action X-Men. The young Cyclops who has to learn to lead. And then there's Jean. Because according to some of these reports, Jean could be responsible for an incident that has consequences far beyond the X-Men themselves. An incident that anti-mutant groups could label as terrorism. Now, this would make sense seeing all of the people that she harmed and some that were even killed during the events of Spider-Man Brand New Day. So, many people view Jean as a threat. They view her as possibly even a terrorist from what she did in the massive blast that she sent out from Roosevelt Island. So if this turns out to be true, Jean could unintentionally become the face of everything that humanity fears about mutants. Imagine being a young mutant who has spent your entire life hiding, and you finally decide to step into the world and use your powers to help people, and the world looks at what happened and says, you're a terrorist. This could completely change Jean's role in the story, and it could put her directly between Charles Xavier and the future Magneto. Now, Christopher Abbott is cast as Professor X, and this casting gives Marvel an opportunity to show us a completely different version of Professor X. We've seen Xavier as the wise mentor. We've seen him as the experienced leader. But if this movie really is about the emergence of mutants, then Charles could be figuring this out at the same time as everyone else. And that could make his relationship with Magneto incredibly important. According to some rumors, Jean's actions could create a massive debate over mutants. Politicians could use the incident to rally an anti-mutant sentiment, and we know that the DODC is basically going to be acting as the anti-mutant task force or militia from the comics, and that's what William Metzger is in charge of in the comics, so Bill Metzger is going to be in charge of that as well. And this is going to lead on to future Sentinels being involved. And Magneto could use that fear to convince Charles that coexistence is not going to work. Because Xavier and Magneto don't necessarily need to disagree about mutants being persecuted. They absolutely are. And they can completely agree on that. They disagree about what mutants should do about it. You see, Charles says we have to show humanity that mutants are not a threat, while Magneto says humanity already decided that we are a threat. And if Jean becomes the person caught in the middle of that argument, She isn't simply a powerful mutant. She's essentially the person that both sides are fighting over. And one of the rumors suggests that the Brotherhood of Mutants could emerge from this conflict. I do not see them going with the Brotherhood in the very first film, especially because that feels like the very first X-Men that we got in 2000, Brotherhood being the main villains. I could see the Brotherhood having a role later on, and I don't think that they're going to keep Magneto sidelined for the entirety of the Mutant saga. I absolutely do not see that. But I don't see them being a massive part of the first film. Maybe introduced towards the end, or maybe even like a post-credit scene or something. But I think this could be a really interesting way to introduce them. Because Marvel does not necessarily need to make the Brotherhood evil from the very beginning either. In fact, it might be more effective if they start with a legitimate argument. Mutants have been hiding. They are being persecuted, and they're being blamed for accidents that they didn't necessarily cause. And now they're being told that they need to prove they are not dangerous. And Magneto can look at all of that and just say this: why are mutants constantly being asked to apologize for existing? And that's a very compelling argument. The problem is where the ideology eventually goes, with some mutants thinking they are superior than humans. Self-defense can actually become retaliation. And Magneto can cross the line while still believing that he is the hero in his own story. And that's the kind of conflict that I believe will make the Brotherhood work really well in the MCU. Then we have Samara Weaving as Emma Frost. And this is where the cast starts getting very, very interesting. Because of the team being rumored to just be the original 5 of Jean, Scott, Beast, Iceman, and Angel, where exactly does Emma Frost fit into all of this? Is she a villain yet? Maybe she will even end up being a teacher at Xavier's Institute before she leaves. And that's happened in the comics before as well. So the question that we need to be asking is, which side is Emma Frost going to be on? I think she could initially start on the side of the heroes, but then shift over gradually as the Hellfire Club and all that storyline gets adapted, and she ends up shifting over to more of the evil side while being an anti-hero in all of it. Because Emma is one of those characters who can occupy a very interesting position because she doesn't have to fit neatly into Xavier's philosophy or even Magneto's. She's intelligent. She's incredibly powerful. She is politically savvy, and she understands mutant society in ways that could make her an invaluable character during the early days of mutantkind. Marvel doesn't need Emma Frost to just simply be another X-Men. She could be one of the characters helping define what mutant society actually becomes. And then we have Rogue. Inde Navarrette has officially been cast as the character, but according to the rumors, Rogue doesn't seem to be a part of the initial X-Men team, which is perfectly okay. I'm fine with them starting with the OG5. I actually really like that, because Rogue doesn't immediately have to become one of the core X-Men for her to be important. If the movie is introducing an entire mutant population, Rogue could represent another side of that experience, especially if Marvel explores the idea that mutations aren't necessarily something that people are prepared for. The rumors suggest that certain mutations could emerge through extremely traumatic experiences, because Rogue is a character whose powers are deeply connected to fear, isolation, and the consequences of her touching another person. Then we got Storm. Maya Boyd is playing Aurora Monroe. And Storm is one of the most important characters that Marvel now has the opportunity to build from the ground up. And if the rumors are accurate, Xavier's school could contain a much larger collection of mutants than the initial 5. But right now we have two conflicting stories. Maybe she's going to be in both. Maybe she's not going to debut in Black Panther 3, but she's going to debut in the X-Men. She'll have a part in Black Panther 3, and then she's just going to end up becoming part of the team later on. But that would allow Marvel to introduce characters gradually, with a lot of mutants being part of the school. We have Jean, Scott, Beast, Angel, Iceman, Rogue, Storm, and then we have potentially many other X-Men. There are so many mutants in the Marvel comics. It's insane. And suddenly, Xavier's school is not just a superhero headquarters. It's actually the beginning of the mutant society that we're going to see. And now the casting that has a lot of people excited, and some people conflicted. Adam Driver as Mr. Sinister. Nathaniel Essex is the name in the comics. When Adam Driver mentioned him at D23, he says Nathaniel Milbury, so I don't know if they're going to go with a completely new name, or if that's another alias from him from the comics, but he's playing Mr. Sinister. That is the character, so the villain himself is not changing. Maybe the name's just going to be a little bit different. Mr. Sinister is not somebody you just cast by accident. It's not, oh, maybe he'll work. No, they need to have Mr. Sinister be a character who is, yeah, he's going to do great. Great. And if Marvel really is introducing him this early in the X-Men saga, there's a massive reason for it. Sinister is obsessed with genetics, mutation, evolution, and the potential of mutant kind. And if this movie is about humanity discovering mutants, then Sinister could represent someone who has been studying the potential long before everyone else understands what actually is happening. And that is creating a fantastic contrast. Charles Xavier wants to understand mutants so he can protect them. If we do get a Magneto, Magneto wants to protect mutants from humanity. But Sinister wants to understand mutants because he sees their genetic potential as something to be exploited. 3 completely different philosophies. And that's why Sinister should not just be treated as another villain. He could potentially become one of the central forces shaping mutant kind from behind the scenes. And I saw a report yesterday saying that Mr. Sinister could be the Loki of this saga for Apocalypse's Thanos. So kind of that same dynamic. Loki was somewhat working for Thanos in the beginning film. He used his army. He was doing it for his own reasons, but he used Thanos' army. Sinister is a creation of Apocalypse, and Apocalypse is going to be the big bad of all of it. But Mr. Sinister is going to be around for a long time, so I'm hoping that they really capitalize on him. They treat him with great respect, and they use him to his fullest potential. There are even rumors that Azazel could be involved in the film as another villain. But again, that's firmly in the rumor category, so take that with a grain of salt. What we know is very, very simple. Adam Driver is playing Mr. Sinister in the first X-Men film. We know that for a fact. But there is another side to the X-Men story that Marvel absolutely needs to establish. The humans. Because if this movie is truly about mutant kind emerging from hiding, humanity needs to have a reaction. And according to the rumors, this reaction sounds like it's going to be pretty ugly. The idea is that traumatic mutations could lead to accidents, destruction, and public fear. And Jean's incident from Brand New Day already makes this worse. People saw what she was capable of in that film. And the public is not going to have a very good perception of her. And with even more people like her emerging, it's going to get really bad really quick. Politicians are going to begin speaking out against mutants. Anti-mutant groups gain influence. And suddenly the X-Men can save the world and still be hated for it. And that's the part of this rumor that I find the most interesting. Because the X-Men are not supposed to live in a world where everybody immediately loves them. Their entire concept is built around being different. So imagine the first time they save the world. And the headline the next morning is Mutants Cause Catastrophe. It's kind of like J. Jonah Jameson's perception of Spider-Man. Nothing Spider-Man can do is right. Ever. And that's where someone like Bolivar Trask becomes incredibly important. Because there's rumors that Bill Metzger is going to return secretly and work with Trask. And he's going to be building the Sentinels. And again, it's just a rumor, but a very possible rumor. But if Marvel is building towards a conflict involving mutant fear, government response, and anti-mutant technology, Trask is an obvious piece of that puzzle. Then we have one of the coolest rumors, and I find this very, very interesting, but it has to do with Spider-Man. A report has suggested that Spider-Man is going to be a very close friend of the X-Men. But at the same time, Magneto and his followers could blame Spider-Man for a supposed mutant cure, which that mutant cure is the inhibitor chip that we saw him develop in Spider-Man Brand New Day. Obviously, he had the one to suppress his arachnid abilities and genetics, and he created the universal one that he used on Jean Grey. Well, Bill Metzger saw what that thing did. And just saying, his inhibitor that he took off when he fought the Hand, because he was choking on his own blood and he needed to use his own powers and embrace it, he left that inhibitor at that facility. They could replicate his work. And they could be trying to control mutants with the technology that Peter Parker created to help, even though it is going to cause a massive problem for the X-Men and future mutants. And that could cause many mutants to view Peter as an enemy. Again, rumor. But conceptually, I love this. This is such a good story that they could develop. Because Peter Parker is arguably the perfect character to bridge the gap between the established MCU and the mutant side of the universe. He knows what it's like to be feared. He knows what it's like to be blamed for things that he did not do. So Peter could naturally sympathize with mutants. But with Magneto and his followers believing Peter Parker is the problem with creating the cure to remove mutations, suddenly Peter is caught between two worlds. And that's exactly what the X-Men story could be about. Not simply heroes fighting villains, people deciding what mutants mean for the future of humanity. And this is where everything potentially comes together. If these rumors are accurate, Marvel is not just introducing an X-Men team. They are introducing an entire mutant ecosystem. You got Xavier, Magneto, you got the X-Men, the Brotherhood, you've got Sinister, you potentially got Trask, you've got anti-mutant politicians, you've got humans and support mutants, you've got humans who hate mutants, and you've got established superheroes who may not even agree on how mutants should be treated. Because this is not just an alien invasion. It's not a multiversal villain. It's a conflict happening inside the world that we've already spent years watching. And that's why I think the timing of this movie is very, very important. Because Marvel has already told us that Avengers Secret Wars is going to fundamentally reshape the MCU And one of the rumors surrounding these X-Men actors is that many of them could appear for the very first time in Secret Wars. We already know Sadie Sink has signed on, she's in the film. And if that's true, Marvel may be using Secret Wars as that bridge. We could meet some of these characters before the X-Men movie. And then the ending of Secret Wars establishes the new unified universe. And suddenly, the X-Men are not just visitors from another reality. They're part of the MCU. They're here, they're public, and the world has to deal with them. And that could be the moment that Marvel finally solves the problem of how mutants existed this whole time without ever being mentioned. They don't necessarily have to tell us that, oh, the X-Men have just been off-world fighting different villains for 30 years. No, we don't even have the X-Men yet. But a lot of their X genes seem to be activating now. They're starting, and this is going to be crazy. And they can establish a world where mutants are now becoming impossible to ignore. And the X-Men movie is where all of this begins, where the Mutant saga begins. So when you look at this casting announcement by itself, it's very exciting. Sadie Sink is going to be phenomenal as Jean Grey. Kit Connor's got very good potential to be Cyclops. Christopher Abbott's kind of new. We have an American playing Professor X. The last two have been British, so that's kind of cool. Samara Weaving is going to kill it as Emma Frost. Inde Navarrete as Rogue. I'm very, very excited. Same with Maya Boyd for Storm. And we got the man himself. Adam Driver is going to do great as Sinister. I think he's going to kill it. I'm very, very excited for it. And I'm happy that he got the role. When you put the rumored story together with those casting choices, the picture gets even bigger. Because Marvel's not just trying to make another X-Men movie. They're trying to introduce mutantkind itself. A young generation of mutants discovering their powers. A group of original X-Men learning what it means to become heroes. A world that doesn't know whether to fear them or accept them. Professor X trying to convince humanity that mutants are not a threat. Magneto, who believes humanity has already made its choice. Jean Grey potentially caught in the middle of all of that. The Brotherhood rising out of all of this. Mr. Sinister watching all of it unfold for reasons of his own. And if these rumors are even partially accurate, the foundation for the X-Men is going to be solid. And the mutant saga is going to flourish over these next 10 years. Because eventually the question won't be, are mutants coming? They'll already be here. And the question will be, what are we going to do about them? And honestly, after seeing this cast, I cannot wait to find out. But that is all I have for today's video. If you did enjoy it, please leave a like. And if you want to see more Marvel content such as news, rankings, theories, lore videos, gaming videos, breakdowns, and more, make sure you hit the subscribe button and turn on post notifications so you never miss an upload. For live updates, I am on social media, and you can follow me on TikTok at Nerds of the Multiverse, on Instagram at The Nerds of the Multiverse, and on X at Nerds of the Mult1. And also, if you've not already subscribed to the Nerd Bros Podcast YouTube channel, make sure you do so. It's a podcast between myself and the Nerds of Ren. It's Marvel, it's Star Wars, it's DC, and we have a new episode coming out every single week, and you do not want to miss it. But with all that being said, Jesus and I love you 3000, and we will see you in the next video.